But Lepore, is there another bet out here that sticks out to you? First, I'll ask you in a good way. Like, is there another number out here with one of these other teams that you just cannot wait to bet?
One that hit me immediately is the Knights. The Knights at 7-1. Number one, because they're psychotic over there and they'll do whatever it takes to get better. And number two, I'd be taking a bet on them getting Jack Eichel and getting a heck of a lot better. And you look at that kind of like similar to the Leafs last year. Like, that's a trash division. Like, you think Vegas now seems like the slam dunk to win that division. If they add,
Vegas is like should be a lock to win.
They should be able to walk to the top of that division. Then if you add Jack Eichel, man, like, so like it's almost hard at this point to not see the Vegas Knights in we're allowed to say the conference finals again. I almost said semifinals. It's not unfair to us to right now to pencil Vegas into the semifinal. So that one jumped out to me. Two others, like, and it's that whole thing with like, you look at these odds, like the team has to win the cup to win, but making the point about like, okay, getting good value. Two that really jumped out at me. One is the Islanders at 22-1. I mean, this is a team that's been to the conference final the last 2 years. Last year, they did it without Anders Lee. And there's the rumblings that they may, not that it would be a huge X factor addition, but there's the rumblings that they may sign Zach Parise. And again, like, you have Lou probably going to try to make the team get better. Be my guest, bet against Barry Trotz. And that division altogether, to me, like, a lot of people are having that division taking a bit of a dive. So why not? Like, they've proven to us in the past that they can go deep, and they have an organization right now that's trying to win. So at 22-1, that one intrigues me. The other one, and people know how much of a homer of this team I am, is the Wild at 25-1. That team did something pretty drastic with those two buyouts of Parise and Suter. I think they're going to like go for it. Like, there's a couple of years from now where like those buyouts are really going to hurt them. So I have that thing in my brain that like, well, in the meantime, they might as well go bananas and go for it and then kind of rebuild later. Like, they'll have their rebuild delayed because of those moves, which is kind of weird and different. And we haven't really seen a team in the NHL do that from what I can remember. But at 25-1, they were a nice team last year. They cut some fat. Bill Guerin's a smart guy. So 25 times your money, man. I think that's pretty good value on the Minnesota Wild. This is a team last year that pushed Vegas to 7. And again, like, right now it's tough to envision like the Minnesota Wild winning the Stanley Cup, but it's about value. And I think that's pretty good value, man.
Yeah, no, I'm right there with you with the Wild. And, you know, we were both high on the Wild last year, and we thought, I mean, you picked them to beat Vegas in the playoffs. I had that series going 7. And I had Vegas winning, but man, that was a team that if they had gotten past Vegas, they could have taken down Colorado. I mean, going back to last season, I did think Colorado was the best team in the league, but that Minnesota team, they were probably the most underrated team in the league. And I think when people started looking at the analytics and they saw what some of the analytics guys on Twitter were talking about, I think a lot of people started getting on the bandwagon of Minnesota and realizing that they were a lot better than met the eye. I mean, you have like Kirill Kaprizov, who came over from the KHL and was unreal last season. You got guys like Kevin Fiala. That blue line is really solid. Like, that's a good team, man. I'm right there with you at 25-1 on the Minnesota Wild. Another team, Lepore, at 25-1 that really sticks out to me is the Dallas Stars.
Nice.
I think that's a very good team. And what people forget, last season, they dealt with COVID. You know, everyone likes to talk about the Habs and how they jammed all these games into like 50 days and they were the only team that did it. There were multiple teams that dealt with that. And the Dallas Stars were one of those teams, because I believe their COVID outbreak happened like right at the start of the season.
Yeah.
And the first like 2 or 3 weeks, they barely played. I think they played like 5 or 6 games. Like, it was crazy over the first like 3 weeks of the season. And that was a team that was missing Tyler Seguin last season. He finally came back, didn't he? I think he came back at the end of the season.
Yeah.
Didn't he have the same injury that you had, Lepore?
He did. Or very, I don't know exactly what procedure he had, but it was a similar hip procedure. So yeah, we're equivalent level athletes.
Exactly. Lepore and Tyler Seguin.
He blew his playing in the NHL. I blew mine playing a co-ed indoor soccer. Same thing, right?
Love it, man. Love it,
Yeah.
Lepore. You're a freak of nature, man.
Yeah.
What an athlete, Michael Lepore. But no, I mean the Dallas Stars, they get a full season of Tyler Seguin. Joe Pavelski had a great season last year, a little resurgence for him. And then you look at the rookie Jason Robertson, who had a nice rookie season. Rupe Hintz, who was essentially a point a game player last year, even though he dealt with some injuries. So you go through their forward core, and I haven't even mentioned guys like Jamie Benn, who now has kind of taken a back seat on that team after being, their leading scorer for a number of years. Alex Radulov. They added Ryan Suter on the blue line to
go with, underrated signing, man. Underrated signing.
Exactly. To go with Miro Heiskanen, who's widely considered one of the best young D-men in the league. Essa Lindell, John Klingberg. And in net, they're still solid with Hudobin and Jake Ottinger. So that's a team that I look at 25-1. And they are in a tough division. You got Colorado, obviously, in that central division, who should run away with it, quite frankly. I mean, St. Louis is solid. And then obviously Minnesota, who we just talked about. So it's probably going to be tough. It's going to be tough for Dallas to, you could argue, to even make the playoffs. But quite frankly, I think that the Stars will make the playoffs. I'm not going to say they're a lock. But yeah, when I look at that team at 25-1, fully healthy, I think that's a pretty solid bet as well to win the Stanley Cup.
No, I think that's an awesome one, Bruno. Like, you impressed me with that one. You may have caused some action to my bank account to fire a transfer to Bodog after talking about the Dallas Stars.
Love it.
Two more that jumped out at me really quick are at this 25-1 number are Pittsburgh and Washington. Like, again, I think if no one's really talking about them, they didn't have the greatest playoffs. Like, it's kind of simmered down, and like the whole Ovechkin Crosby thing. But again, 25 times your money, and these are teams that are going to try to win. They're going to try to get better. So I like those ones too, man.
Yeah.
I think it kind of shows our like gambling problems that there's so many of these bets that
we're just going to light so much money on fire before the season starts. No, but honestly, man, like those should almost be insta bets on Pittsburgh and Washington, as crazy as that sounds, right? It's like, again, you talk about like cores still being in place. Like, do you want to bet against Crosby and Malkin? Like and listen, I know recently Crosby has not had a lot of playoff success. I tweeted about this, going back to earlier in the summer, where he has like a brutal record. His last, 3 playoff series or something, like it's sad. Like, they've been swept twice.
Yeah.
And then they lost in like 5 or 6 games the other time. So, but again, that's a team I do not want to bet against. And same thing with Washington, right? Like, all they got to do is tinker a few things. Maybe they make a trade. And next thing you know, those teams are going on a run again. So yeah, I love them at 25-1 as well.
And again, the Metro is kind of like a weird division. Like, if you really look at the rundown of the Metro, is there anyone that would not too many teams that would shock you? Like if they came out?
No, not at all.
So,
especially considering and I guess we can segue into which bets look bad. And one thing that sticks out to me, Lepore, is the Carolina Hurricanes at 12-1. Speaking about that Metropolitan Division, they lost Dougie Hamilton in free agency to the Devils, and the Devils also in the Metro, but I don't think they're quite ready to make a run yet. And the New York Islanders, despite everything you said about them, and I completely agree with you, you could even argue that team has slightly taken a step back. But again, like, that's a team last year, Lepore, going into the playoffs, no one had the Islanders getting out of that East Division, right? With Boston and obviously with Pittsburgh, especially Pittsburgh winning. I believe Pittsburgh won that division last season.
They did.
And they were the favorites to go to the semifinals. But yeah, that's a Metro division, man, that when you look at it, it's like, honestly, I can see a number of these teams emerging and getting to the conference finals. And yeah, like going back to Carolina, they lost Dougie Hamilton. They have completely new goaltending. So I don't think they're as strong as they were last season. And then the New York Rangers, they have Chris Drury, who they just brought in as general manager, and they're kind of tinkering with things. They lost Pavel Buchnevich, and they signed Barclay Gaudreau to that terrible 6-year contract. So
yeah,
that's a team where you're not quite, they have a lot of talent, but can they figure it out? So yeah, man, like I'm looking at Pittsburgh and Washington for sure. But yeah, one team that sticks out to me as being a kind of a shitty bet right now is the Hurricanes at 12-1.
Yeah, the Carolina one jumped out to me too. What do you think? They come one after another. What do you think about the Bruins and Panthers? Bruins at 15-1, Panthers at 18-1.
If I were to bet on one of those, I'd probably bet on the Panthers.
Yeah.
And again, like that's a team where it's kind of similar to the Leafs, where they just have not been able to have that progression. Like that's a team that that you think would probably be a little bit further ahead than they are right now, just based on having like Barkov and Huberdeau as their core. And they just brought in Sam Reinhart and they picked up Sam Bennett last season. Like it's a really nice offensive team. But yeah, I would still bet on them just because the Bruins, man, like I'm almost over the Bruins at this point. Like I know Marchand is still a really good player. Same with Bergeron. Those guys are, approaching their like mid 30s at this point, but they lost David Krejci to the Czech Republic. I know they signed Taylor Hall, but that's a team that I still think has taken a step back. And at 15-1, I think I'm just off the Bruins train.
Yeah, like I kind of would look at it that way. Like I think kind of like everything everything we were saying about the Atlantic division, how strong it is, and then the Metro being kind of weak. It's like if someone said to you, you can take the Bruins at 15-1 or Pittsburgh or Washington at 25-1. I'm like, that's a no-brainer. Yeah. I go Pittsburgh or Washington at the 25-1.
Oh, 100%.
And again, like value again, right? What do you think about the Seattle Kraken at 35-1?
Man,
why not?
That's really interesting because I know a lot of people are going to have the Vegas Golden Knights at the back of their head, knowing what they did in their inaugural season, getting to the Stanley Cup final. But man, when you look at that Pacific division, and we talked about it when we were going over the Vegas Golden Knights, like it's just not very good. So you could easily, like, no one should be surprised if Seattle makes the playoffs this season.
No, not at all.
Not at all. And all it's going to take is for them to win a playoff series, and that team gets into the second round. And who the hell knows, man? Because they don't have like any like star, like elite level players on their roster. But man, you look at that roster, it's pretty solid, man. So looking at them at 35-1, like it's not bad. It's not bad. I'm not going to put my money on them, but it's not bad.
They'd ride the wave too. Like the crowd would be crazy. The city would be buzzing. It'd be that thing like you've lost before you even stepped on the ice if you're playing in Seattle. Was it last time? Am I not mistaken? Was Vegas not like something crazy, like 400-1 or something their inaugural year? And like, that was the big story.
Yeah, it was absurd. I don't remember the exact number, but they were definitely like over 100, if not 200-1.
It was in the hundreds to much. I think I remember, and maybe I'm getting this way up. I remember seeing a guy in Vegas put like opening day, put down $50. And I think he would have won like 40 grand, which would be 800-1. And maybe one casino. Maybe one casino somewhere gave him those kind of odds because it was a new team, 400-1. But yeah, it was crazy. I remember too, getting the story. So whatever the amount was, like the guy was going to win like tens of thousands of dollars. So Vegas was in the final against Washington, and he could have hedged his bet. And he could have put like say like 20 grand on the Capitals to say even money or whatever it was. And they asked him, and he said no. He's like, I rode that. Yeah, I rode this wave the whole time. He's like, let's do it. He's like, so
at that point, you got to hedge your bet.
Yeah, when you're talking that kind of money, I think you got to. I definitely think you got to.
But yeah, the books are learning their lesson because Seattle at 35-1, like you just go down the list, there is a good 12, 13 teams that have worse odds than them to win the Stanley Cup.
I read something too somewhere. So like obviously the odds they give you are like based on math, like higher than what they should be, because I mean Vegas has got to win money. And we're reading somewhere like it wasn't always necessarily like that, especially with like the lower teams. And it was like the 70s in baseball or something, and they had a team at like in the thousands, like some horrible team like in the thousands, and people dabbled a few dollars at it. They threw $5 at it, $10 at it, $1 at it. And the team ended up being in the pennant race. And I don't remember the exact team it was and what year it was, but it kind of sent alarm bells through Vegas. Like, no, we can't have these happen because it's going to bankrupt us if 1 year, one team just does it. Right. So.
Yeah, and it's the same thing with Leicester City in the Premier League.
Oh yeah.
Right, where I can't remember what they were, but it was like insane odds to win the Premier League that season. And yeah, I think a lot of these books have learned their lessons, not to like get too crazy with how they're pricing some of these teams that no one really expects to never mind win the Stanley Cup, to even make the playoffs.
Yeah, there was the Euro Cup too when Greece won. I think it was like 400 to 1 for them to make the final. It was like 400 to 1 for them, 400 to 1 for them to make the final, 800 to 1 for them to win. And they won. Oh my
goodness.
A tournament like that, it'd be like, say, this last Euro Cup, like not the Greece's equivalent to like, say, Macedonia or like one of those countries picking them to win the whole thing. Like, yeah, you're going to get crazy odds. Like these teams sometimes go to these tournaments and don't score a goal, like let alone like win the entire tournament. And Greece did it. Is there any team like in the bottom half that jumps out to you as a nice bet?
Just looking at the betting board here,
like kind of like you could see something happening. Like I think we're talking about winning the Stanley Cup, but it's about value, right?
Another team.
What was Chicago? What was Chicago 40 to 1, like with those additions, or is that just like,
I don't know, man. The thing with Chicago, I don't think they're very good still, and I'm so sick of people getting on this train. Like I saw a tweet out there where I don't know who he writes for, but he sent out a tweet saying that I think he writes for Post Media, and he sent out a tweet. I'll name drop him actually. Michael Traco sent out this tweet where he was saying that the Blackhawks should be in the same league as Tampa and Vegas and Colorado. He mentioned Tampa and one other team, was either Vegas or Colorado, but he's like, the Blackhawks with all these additions now are right in the Stanley Cup conversation with these teams.
He wanted clicks.
It's like, are you kidding me? Seth Jones, first of all, completely overpaid. I think that contract is egregious. As good of a player as he is, egregious contract. That team, you look at that blue line still, it's still not very good. Marc-Andre Fleury, who we've talked about, Michael Lepore is the number one. I don't want to call you the number one Marc-Andre Fleury hater, but man, oh man.
But things happen to that guy. That's why I'm like, why not Chicago? Why watch Fleury's going to like bring them to the Stanley Cup final or something just to like stick it to me. But
no, yeah, man. Like that team, I just look at that team on paper still, and I know they're probably going to get Jonathan Taves back, who missed all of last season, but I'm not touching that team. I don't think they're ready to win a Stanley Cup. I know they're 40 to 1, and that's pretty juicy, but in that same range, the Blues and the Jets at 40 to 1. That's sort of intriguing. And I know the Blues did not have a good season last year, but when you look at that team, you know, I'm just looking at them on paper, like it's still a pretty decent team. Like you still got.
That's how I feel about the Flames. Like you look at the lineup and you're like, yeah, it's a nice lineup. Like you're getting 50 to 1.
Mm-hmm.
Like again, like the whole thing is kind of hard right now to envision the Calgary Flames winning the Stanley Cup, but 50 times your money is pretty freaking good for something like for something crazy to happen.
Yeah, I think that's probably like the lowest I'd go. Lepore,
the line
is probably like that 50 to 1 range, because then looking at some of these other teams like Nashville and New Jersey and the Kings all in the 60 to 1 range. Same with the Canucks. And then you're getting into all the long shots. But yeah, I think where I draw the line, honestly, I think you nailed it. Like right at Calgary, probably at 50 to 1 is where I draw the line and be like, okay, I don't want to light. I'm down for lighting some money on fire, but I don't want to light this much money on fire.
I didn't tell you how much to put down, Bruno. I just said you should lay the bet.
That's fair. I mean, hey, you could put $5 on one of these teams that's, exactly. You know, these teams that are 100, 125 to 1. Why the hell?
Yeah, I remember one guy I knew what he would do with like hockey betting is he would just pick something absolutely bananas every night and put like $5 on it. Like he'd bet Ovechkin's going to score 5 goals. And he put $5. He'd get like why not? You get like 1,000 to 1 or something like on that happening, and whatever 500 to 1. So and that one time you hit it, you got a story to tell, right?
Exactly.